Okay. Hello, everyone. It's the Sheldon and Lewis show. And today we have Matt Ball. And Matt is one of our favorite people on the planet. And I have to tell the story of when we met Matt. It was in the Mirth of Maybe in Scotland. And it was a Hearing Voices event. And there were probably 100 people who'd been diagnosed with psychosis. And there were axes all around.
Oh, oh, oh.
And Matt pointed out that the only bad thing that happened is somebody threw a sleeping bag at someone else. So I'll never forget that. That was really fun. And we've been hearing about the great things that Matt does at the Humane Clinic in Adelaide for years. And it's just really impressive. And I wish we could figure out how to get funding to do such a thing in the US, but right now we're in retrograde. So funding is it's all going to Argentina to support $40 billion Trump just sent to Argentina to support the guy that's getting put in jail for trying to overthrow the government. So anyway, enough politics. Somebody will be upset with me for saying that, but we could sure use that money to help people with, you know, mental health issues. So anyway, so Matt, what else do you want to say about yourself? You're an amazing guy. You've had lived experience. You've escaped
Mhm.
from the mental hospital. You've
Yes.
escaped from the establishment,
Yeah.
and you're
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I'm just grateful to be here talking. You and Barbara are so kind about me, but that event in 2015 was quite wonderful, wasn't it? And I think it it brought together such an odd group of people, if you like. I remember one young woman was dropped off there because someone said they didn't know what to do with her, so they dropped her off to this gathering. And she spent 4 days really. I mean, I'm not sure how else to say it other than being loved and embraced for who she was, and that was the kind of spirit of the event, I think.
That's indeed.
Um, and I suppose, I wonder sometimes what we're doing over here, and I guess that's what we're going to talk about. But what we're doing over here is not much more than, oh, I don't mean to say it's not much more, but it's really about maybe returning back to one another as community and finding a way to do that. And so that's become my interest and my passion, and it was inspired by events of the Axis and uh, that event. I was living a kilometer nearly up a hill in a 10th century mock roundhouse with no doors, with there was 12 men in the room. And one of the funny things that happened was we were all had beds around the edge, and there's a fire in the middle with an axe and some wood. And over the 3 or 4 days, we all put our mattresses closer and closer and closer to keep warm and to be together, I suppose. And the bit that was beautiful about that was I often think this at the Hearing Voices group we run or the community we have is the world doesn't see people who get labeled as psychotic as normal, equal, relatable humans. And what we saw that day was that all of us had the same and different versions of our unusual beliefs and beings in the world, and we came together and were loving and kind and yeah, that was my memory. And the other memory I have was Barbara singing whilst making a mache face of mine to create a mask, and it stands as one of the most powerful experiences of my life, having this relational experience and finding an image of my face while someone was singing and attending and being generous of spirit towards me. So that's what comes up when you say, "What else do I want to say?" That's my memories.
Yeah, it was an incredible thing, and I think we should honor Ron Coleman who
Yeah.
set it up. And Ron is an amazing guy who's close to death now from heart failure, and I
Yeah.
regret not having visited him recently. But he does live on an island off the coast of Scotland, which is not easy to get to. But it is the
Yeah.
Isle of Lewis, so I should claim it. You know.
Yes.
But anyway, Ron was the creator of that event, I think. I'm sure other people helped him, but Karen, his wife, helped him. And Ron has just been an amazing force in sort of the alternatives to hospitalization movement, I could call it. And then he developed a bit of cognitive impairment, and he became a champion for people with cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
And now finally his heart is giving out, which is really sad. But um,
Mm.
my favorite T-shirt, Ron made a T-shirt which I still wear, which is I'm psychotish and I'm proud.
Ah, gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ron came over here in 2015, 16 when I was working in the public health service and came and just did one day in Adelaide. And I
Mhm.
remember trying to justify to my bosses why they should pay for this um, loud, brash,
Garrett.
former, former schizophrenic, in quotes, to come and tell us what we needed to know about hearing voices and how to spend time with voice hearers. And anyway, we did get it funded, and he did come. And I think that was for me, that was really powerful. And I think for our community, it was really powerful to see
Yeah.
someone be so explicit about the hearing voices approach and the need to accept people's realities and then I think embrace people's realities for the wisdom it brings, the knowledge it brings, the need for it to be there, or each of our realities in being. And that was a really powerful day we had. I can still remember it was on the beachfront at Christie's Beach, right down from where I now work.
Wow.
And yeah, I
You
can
know,
remember that.
I remember, I think the last time I spent with Ron was in Perth, and it
Mm.
was some sort of a, God, I can't even remember what the name of the event was, but Ron and Karen were hosting it in some manner of speaking.
Mm.
And it was also an incredible gathering. And
Yeah.
um, I brought my son, which was an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we saw mini kangaroos.
Ah, quokkas.
Yeah, yes. And of course there's kangaroos in your backyard.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of you when you came to us when we opened Humane Clinic, Lewis. I remember the night you came and talked at our new building alongside Auntie Georgina, who passed but was a senior Ghana elder. And what we discovered that night was perhaps the Cherokee and the Ghana people have had relationship for a long time. And Georgina told the story of the Trabuki and the song lines from our clinic down to the ocean, and just the power of bringing together different uh, indigenous stories. Um, yeah, was a real gift. And then you came back to our house and you offered ceremony at our house. And of course, your son stayed with us as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, that was a special time for us.
And weren't we on our way to Perth? That was the that was when, right, because
Yeah,
Barbara went straight to Perth and we
that's
stopped
right.
in Adelaide.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was another time though when Barbara was there that I think there's on the way back, Barbara was there, and that's when we did the program for the opening of the Humane Clinic.
yeah,
Right on the way
yeah,
back, we stopped in Adelaide. And
yeah,
yeah, and my son was so ecstatic because the day that I did whatever I did with you, he went kangaroo watching.
yeah, yeah. We have a yeah hundreds of kangaroos. This summer they've we've had or this winter we've had drought, so they've been coming and sitting on my front lawn,
Oh,
Lewis. We have kangaroo poo everywhere, and
oh wow. You
yeah,
know,
it's funny.
I was telling a indigenous woman at a conference we were at, I think it was in Sydney a couple years ago, about the time when I petted a wild kangaroo, you know, and um I don't know if you know this story, but I I I was working in a locked psych unit and was I took a bet from a nurse who said, I said, everyone has a sweet skill. And she said, this woman doesn't. She's a burned out schizophrenic. She doesn't have any sweet skills. And I said, you're wrong. I will find her sweet skills. So we bet $5, you know. Um, and I said, so what's your sweet skill? You know, because I was doing a daily narrative therapy group. And she said, well, if anyone wants to steal parts from a junkyard, they come find me because I know how to calm junkyard dogs. And she proceeded to tell us the culinary preferences of every breed of dogs. And I said, so if I didn't know what breed there was in the junkyard, what should I take? And she said, peanut butter. They all love peanut butter. So when I wanted to, this was on Raymond Island, and I
Mhm.
wanted to pet a wild kangaroo. That was my fantasy. And so I got a whole bunch of Skippy peanut butter and put it on a piece of bread. And I went to where there were kangaroos hanging out, you know, and none of them would get too close to people. So I just sat down and I held it in my hand and I waited 40, it took 45 minutes for one of them to come
Mhm.
over, who was taller than me, I might add.
Yeah.
And he came over and he ate the peanut butter and I got to pet him. Whereupon the greatest disappointment that I've had, it turns out kangaroos feel like steel wool. They're not soft. They feel like steel wool. It's no fun to
That is
pet them, buggers. But
yes.
anyway, this Aboriginal woman said to me, she said, you're either completely nuts or you're a kangaroo whisperer.
Yeah.
She said, do you know that bloke could have killed you? And I said, well, that didn't seem likely at the time.
No.
Well, again, you're either completely nuts or you're a kangaroo whisperer. I'd like to think that rock wallabies are a little nicer to pet. I think I'll
Right.
try that next time. I know a place outside of Alice Springs where there's a lot of rock wallabies. They might be nicer to pet. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
But you know,
I'm
it,
gonna take Lewis, when you're here next, I'm gonna take you to a place. I know some softer kangaroos.
mm,
I'm gonna take you to a place.
all right, very good. None of those steel wool Raymond Island beasts.
No.
But there's something about talking, communicating, relating to other than humans that teaches us how to work with people who are living in other dimensions.
Mm.
And I think
Well,
that that's probably important,
yeah.
like it's training for us to to figure out how to relate to dogs, cats, kangaroos, you know, anything, because we have to drop into another mode of listening.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's I suppose in my work or what we do at Just Listening Community and Humane Clinic, I think and I think this is an issue or a dilemma for the mental health industry as I think of it rather than a system now. I think it's become industrialized to the extreme.
Mhm.
And I think what probably the biggest uh, dilemma that throws up in my mind is that we forget to take care of the moments of listening and relating. So
Mm.
lots of slogans, lots of big ideas and powerful sort of campaigns. But I think what we've been concerned with is to try and notice the moments of how we might be in relationship, how we might hear one another. And it just reminded me thinking about what animals can teach us
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
about that because there's something, it seems like there's something more attuned or our spirit is more important in that than the words we use.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's become a passion and an interest for us as the Just Listening community or Humane Clinics work is paying attention to what's happening, particularly as the listener.
Mhm.
You know, what's happening to you. Don't worry about trying to change or create stories or do anything to the other person. They'll do that. They're already doing that. They are being that. So we don't need to make up those stories for them. What we might do is take some, you know, kind, compassionate responsibility for the stories and you know, we talk about them as vertical voices, but, you know, we're talking about our lives, our ancestors, our spirits, our cultures, our communities. What are the stories we're walking around with that come between me and another?
Mm-hmm.
And um, I think that's become a passion, certainly for me, but for Rory and Bernie, who I work with, is to really try and notice what I'm doing that gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
And then that
Yeah.
way I'm not going to do things to other people. I can then be with other people. And I
Mhm.
think that's what often is, oh, that my reflection is that's often what we don't notice.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Yeah.
it reminds me, and I'll say it wrong, Lewis, but it since I have been introduced to Etiopamunk,
Right. Right. You said it
is that the
right.
right way to say it?
Yeah. 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 It's good.
And this two-eyed seeing, um, I think that's been inspiring, and we often talk about that Etiopamunk and you bringing that to the fore more. I know it came from Albert Marshall's ideas, I think, and but how do we rather than seeing the other person, how do we also see ourselves? Because there's two stories in this relationship, and the
Mhm.
only one we can really be in is ours, and that's while we're in relation to the others.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I think we need to pay attention to, and that doesn't fit well with mental health services, right? Because that might appear to mean that I'm not an expert in somebody else's narratives. Well, I'm not. So that's okay. But it's a tricky thing to sell if the industry is about, quite a neoliberal movement of economics around a system. Then me saying, oh, the other person's okay, or more than okay, they they're being.
Mhm.
And I don't need to change that or do that, or even knowing about that's not really gonna, that's a curiosity of mine, but it might or might not be even useful. But what if I take on the responsibility to be with me? And how do I do that? And that's what I think we're trying to pay attention to in the
Yeah.
listening process. Yeah, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've
Mm.
I've known some indigenous elders who were the most amazing listeners that I've ever encountered. And I think my favorite was Vern Harper. who's crossed over now, but he was the elder in residence at the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto.
Mm.
And he would regularly go once a week to the worst part of Toronto and sit down on the curb and just bear witness to people. And he told me, I went with him a few times. He told me, he said, I don't need to tell them anything. They've already been told everything by someone else. He said, what they need is someone to bear witness to their life,
Mhm.
that they're alive, they're here, and we care. It was just amazing to see him in action. There was another guy like that. Dan Smoke was his name. He was in Western Ontario. And Barbara had this experience with him where she talked and talked and talked, and he listened and listened and listened. And for the first time in her life, she ran out of things to say because he'd listened that long. And no one else had ever listened to her for that long. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
I think about
yeah,
there's a French psychoanalyst, Jacques Lacan, who said the greatest gift we can give someone is to listen without judgment or interpretation.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think about that all the time.
And there's a lovely quote in your book, Remapping the Mind from Lacan, saying that if we really listen, then people will tell stories previously untold,
Mm.
and they'll have both people will have a greater experience. And
Indeed.
I think we've taken a lot of inspiration from that and tried to work with that. Um, it's interesting what you said about Barbara there to me. We sometimes have people come and talk for 5 hours because we're open for 5 hours, and they come back the next day, they talk for another 5 hours. They come back, they talk for another 5 hours, and then eventually they stop coming to talk we would say, when in that time they've been listened to enough or they felt heard,
Yeah.
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
they can stop talking. But if they haven't, then they'll keep coming back, and
I
that's
think
okay.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and and I think equally we see people come for 5 minutes and feel very different when they've been listened to.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think some of the some of what we've experienced is perhaps not so much non-judgment, but the listener taking responsibility for their judgments or taking on, oh, look, I've got judgments here, but that probably won't be useful to that person. I don't live in their being.
Mhm.
So maybe I won't bother sharing my judgments with them because they're my being. They're my being. I got to manage that. I got to work with those spirits, those stories, those ways of being in the world. That
Mhm.
person's not asked me if I could. People don't come to our community and say, "Could you, could you just put all your judgments on me, please?" That would be really, that'd be really good. I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed. I wonder if you could pile on a bit more, a bit more of your own stories on me, please. They don't say that. They come and say the opposite. They say, would you be able to hear me? Would you be able to listen to this moment in time?" And how we would describe it is, um, if I listen to you and you've got a story that's occupying you, in white Western models we might say in our mind, but that's how we might describe it. And you say it out loud, it comes out of your mouth, and I just hold my loving spirit to you as a human, whoever or whatever I am. I just hold my spirit. Well, and I don't need to interrupt you. You'll hear that story differently when it's reflected back to me. If you're telling it, you say it hits my heart and it comes back to you, just having been heard by a loving spirit. Now it's no longer just inside your mind, it's also
Mhm.
coming back to you outside of you. And so you've got two stories. You've
Mhm.
got the story that was
Uh-huh.
hurting and stuck in your mind, and now you got a story out here between you and a loving human. Well, that sounds different, that feels different. It hasn't corrected anything, it hasn't changed the problems that still exist. But what it has said is, there's more than one story here. And
Mhm.
that again comes back to the two-eyed seeing, that has been so helpful for us to read and think about, Lewis, is if you've got two stories, two understandings, two ways of seeing and being, then there's more possibilities. And
Right.
you're probably holding more wisdom, right? Because and so the listener doesn't have to do anything. They have to hold their loving heart, their humanity, their being towards you. And that's kind of our where we're coming from.
Mm.
Uh, and equally, we need to offer that to each other as workers. So what do I what do I need to be able to hold my loving spirit towards somebody else? Well, I probably need somebody to hold their loving spirit towards me. And
Yeah.
and then that way there's also room for me to have more than one story about this difficult story I'm hearing from someone else.
Right.
And then I don't need to get in the middle of that.
Mm.
If
Yeah.
that does that make any sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
It also sounds like you're talking about us listening inside, listening to ourselves inside. Like there's all this stuff coming up when this person
Mm,
is
absolutely.
telling their story or just talking, whatever it is. Um,
Yeah.
and whether it's judgments or whether we want to offer something or we feel like there's something to do other than just being and being present and being open and, as you say, being loving.
Mm,
So I think that's one of the things that I've learned through my meditation practice is that um, if in meditation I can notice what I'm doing internally, then that changes how I go around in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I
Absolutely.
think, yeah, I really resonate with that because I think it then gives us choice not to try and change the other. If we can see that, if we can be with that, if we
Yeah.
can feel into be in that space, then we don't have to get in the way. The other thing is, the dissociotic stuff that I talk about, really all I'm talking about is someone arrives and places between us what they need in order to exist. If I try and move that out the way, well, then I'm not honoring them because they needed that to be there. They're
Right.
offering, look, if we take voices and visions, I've got some voices and visions that I need here right now so that we can be here together. Well, I probably need to know how I am with that in order to stay with the voices and visions and to engage with the voices and visions and to be around them. Whereas if I can't see that, then I have to take on without thinking about it, the stories of my Western world that say, oh, we mustn't have voices and visions. We must get rid of that. And so I'm pushing these things away that are between us that this person skillfully invited me to know, to be with, to hear, to see. I'm pushing them out the way because, oh, they can't be here. Well, then the person's voices and visions might get bigger. The
Mm-hmm.
person's distress might get bigger. And then I say, oh, now they're really, really unwell. But I did that. They didn't do it. I did it. They're just being skillful. They're
And
bringing their stories.
skillful and generous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I recently discovered I was always critical of psychoanalysis because it seemed sort of dumb. But I recently discovered something called intersubjective psychoanalysis. And mostly because I was called upon to supervise a trainee to do psychoanalysis for a year with someone. And I discovered this it was created by Stolero and Atwood, and it's all about um, what happens in the intersubjective field. And their whole point of view is that interpretations are meaningless and stupid, and don't do them. and and what matters is what's happening with the two people together and the stories that they tell. And I thought, well, this is like narrative therapy intersecting with psychoanalysis because I mean
Mm,
I think you could call it something different than psychoanalysis, but the people who invented it came from that tradition. and had to overthrow their Freudian background. And but they're still calling it psychoanalysis, but it's really self-analysis. It's really like looking at me and the relationship with you, and what am I feeling, and what is it about you that's triggering what I'm feeling, and how is that um, like a pattern that maybe you've learned or a story that you're enacting that isn't working in your life, and how can I bring that to your awareness in a loving way so that you have more choice. And I think that's very similar to narrative therapy, when it comes down to it.
It's interesting what the stories in my mind when you said that were. Uh, how can I bring that to your awareness to the other so that you have more choice? And I suppose I would go further. Oh, maybe I would go further and say, how can I let you bring that to your awareness
Mm,
rather than me bringing it? Because I trained, it made me laugh when you said psychoanalysis. My first trainers in my first psychotherapy training, the head trainer was a psychoanalyst. And so I was heavily influenced by that. And, Freud, but Bion, Bick, some of the British analysts as well. Um, and I got excited initially by analysis
yeah,
because I think it made me feel powerful to have
right. That you know more
knowledge.
than the client. Right.
Yeah,
Right. That you're the expert. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's right. On I clever, as if I could know the world of the other. Like it's a madness, really, to think, oh, I could know. Yeah, no, I know Sheldon's world better than Sheldon. So
Mhm.
I'll share that with Sheldon, and Sheldon will suddenly feel wise. But I don't know Sheldon's world. I don't know Lewis's world. I don't know anybody else's world, but they might be generous enough to let me know more about my world by if I can hold space or be in relationship so they can share their world. And actually, I mean, this sort of maybe uncomfortable for me to think about. I wonder whether therapy is really about the therapist completely. So we say it's for the other, but maybe we need to start with acknowledging it's entirely about me. Importantly, so that I can create this, I can hold the space between you and me so you can hear you. But
Yeah.
that sort of means it's about me.
Well, it's a subtle and interesting point because I'm thinking of Barbara and I frequently talk about one of her clients, and his pattern is to pick crazy women and get into relationships with them and then get kicked out, like to do what. And her thing is, her struggle is, how do I bring him, how do I help him become aware that this is a pattern, because it's not working, uh, clearly. And there is some contract that she would say that she's supposed to be useful for him. So just listening doesn't cut it. I mean, it's not enough. She has to do something to bring his awareness to this pattern that messes up his life.
Mm.
And um so I don't know how that fits into what we're talking about, but it seems important, because it's sort of the contract that I'm here for you and I'm here to listen to you, but maybe I can see something that you're not seeing and share it with you, and maybe that'll be useful to you.
Mm.
I have a thought for that.
Ah, yes, join us. Oh, ephemeral being from Scotland.
Weird Scottish banshee bee.
Well, we're going to see Macbeth next week, so
Yeah.
this is totally
Ah,
Ah.
You're not supposed to
Scottish
say
play.
the word Macbeth, the play that must not be named.
Oh,
No, but what I had happen with this client was that I was able to, and it is about listening, and suddenly there was an opening for me to say, I remember last time this happened, you had given so much of your space, your time, your money away. You had nothing for you. I'm wondering if in this case, could we see, could you be a priority? Could you make yourself a priority? And we ended up in a productive discussion about how he was secondary to, well, of course, the powerful feeling of belonging and all that. And how could we make it so that you could protect yourself a little, even if it's just 5 or 10%, even if it's just a little, don't sell your house, walk. He'd literally hand built a beach house. And then because he lived in it with another woman, he had given it up to please somebody. And it was just it opened up this very powerful feeling of and at first he was like, no, this is what I do, this is how I feel. But now, because I've been with him long enough, and honestly, it's the time that we've spent together, where if I say he trusts me a little bit more, and if I say, hey, I'm just noticing that this, maybe we could just to shift it a little, just to kind of make it so that
Mhm.
you're not always starting from scratch after this, and kind of,
Yeah.
yeah. So, it presented itself. The opening presented itself to make a connection in a different way, to be able to say something. And what I what I could say that was constructive and not kind of like, yeah, it was construct and fit into his paradigm. He has a paradigm about relationship that is very important to him. And it involves this sort of sacrificial element. So it's not something you can say, oh my goodness, are you nuts? You're giving her everything. It's not that. It's okay within the scope of your paradigm. How can we just kick it into 5% less ruinous for you, when this happens? A harm reduction approach,
Hmm.
if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
well, and I think that enters into the notion of genuine dialogue, which is that I might have some feedback for you from my experience of what you've said to me, and you can take it or leave it. I mean, but it's still what I'm experiencing from listening to you, and it might be helpful.
I feel excited. That's what we would be teaching in just listening is the what I would call in the dissociocritic paper the coexisting same experience. So I'm having an experience here, and so are you. Maybe I can share my experience of our moments of relating. So last time you told me a similar story, and I'm noticing that story is coming up again. I wonder whether that story is still you want to play that story. Like I don't know, like you said, Barbara. I wonder what we could do differently here, or what it might be like here, 5%. But something about this has come up for me in the process of being in this relationship and listening. It's not come up with the theory of
Right,
Freud
right.
and the
Or
Oedipal
because it's
complex.
section
It's
3 of my
yeah,
non-DV relationship training. It's
yeah,
come up
yeah.
in our conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So we're having a coexisting, I'm having a coexisting relationship. My experience of your story is different to yours. Would you like to know my experience of this story?
I like that. Yeah.
And also that's mixed up with all my stories, all my ancestors and my spirit and my culture and my relationships and my parents and all that. So that's why I've got a I can hear this story in a different way because I just have different stories in me. And
Mhm.
would you like to hear that story?
Yeah.
And and that's where I think we were inspired by the work of Lauren Mosher, for example, who said, "How do we be with people rather
Mhm.
than
That's
be to
that's it.
them?"
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's a different activity. The the
Yeah.
the beingness doesn't seem like an activity. It seems like a non-activity.
Yeah.
It's, I sometimes call it withness, like we're with each other,
Yeah.
and stuff like what Barbara's describing and you're describing. It's like there's an opening, something happens,
Yeah.
cosmic.
Yeah, and that's more than one story, that's and just listening as a model was the name was taken from the work of Leon Redler and Stephen Gans in their book. And of course, Leon was a colleague and friend of Lang in the 60s and 70s in those spaces they were holding. And
Mm.
our just listening for us is about justice in listening, justice
Mhm.
in this moment to this story between us, not just sitting back. I think that comes across to some people. We're sitting back, not doing anything else. No, no, no. We're working jolly hard to offer justice to the narratives that exist between us
Mm.
and certainly to the person who's sharing. How do I offer justice to you? Well, I could tell you my experience of this if you'd like to know. And that if that's a just thing to do, then I'll do that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like that a lot. And I think that conservation gets you a lot farther and a lot deeper, even if it takes a longer time at the front end. I call it front end loading, if I'm going to be, establishing a trusting relationship, it's going to take a minute. It's not going to be 6 weeks or 10 weeks or, a half an hour every fourth week. It's great to relate. And, so we step outside the official boundaries of engagement and, I'll just happen to be around for a walk or happen to be,
Mhm.
keep continuity and to keep growing a sense that I'm really there listening, that it's not because it's 1:30 Monday. It's because I'm there. I will help you make a time. I will, you know, go that extra distance to make sure that we connect in a week, to make sure that I pay attention to what you're telling me about not connecting. You're busy, your child is sick. Okay, all of that, not the, and when I started at the clinic, they were very big on you miss one appointment and now you're on a short list. You miss two appointments and you can only have same day. You miss three appointments and you have to reapply. And I was like, no, none of that. I will just like working with people, and I got them to let me make my own schedule the day after I did it. Before they were trying to make me put a schedule in and then stick to it, and they would try to phone people who don't have phones, and or
Yeah.
and it was just not how to do it. It wasn't how to get people to feel.
Like the woman who lived in a tent behind the racetrack.
Yeah, she did not have a working phone. And when on the day when the state, so when Obamacare came in, it meant a lot of people could get health care, and the states were offered a fund to help bridge the gap for payments to the state-based medical care. And some states refused to take it. And originally, the governor of Maine refused to take it. Why should he was an all or nothing, winner take all kind of guy. But then he got voted out, and the new person, January 1st, the first thing she did when she got January 1st, she took over. January 1st at midnight 12, she signed the extension. And by January 2nd, we were all in the office going like, I need to enroll these people in healthcare. And
Yeah.
I had this woman with me, and she was only really comfortable between 10 and 11 in the morning. And that was, you had to get it done, and it was getting late. And we went in to see the woman, and the woman said, well, we did try to call you and you didn't answer your phone. And I said, she's living in a tent at the racetrack. And the woman, God bless her, looked at me and she said, then let's call this the interview. And we just went from there and got her involved. In winter.
Yeah.
She's
In
living
winter.
in a tent at the racetrack in winter.
Well, and
Yeah.
that was sort of what we're talking about, because you always brought her coffee from Dunkin' Donuts
I did.
when you went to see her
Even though
in
it's
the
not
race.
my scope of practice, I brought her a coffee with a hazelnut shot in it from Dunkin' Donuts, and I would walk in my ice shoes across the little stream up the bank and the ice and give her a coffee and check in with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I love that you're bringing your scope of practice because, yeah, no, it's not in my scope of practice to do most of what I do, and that's because I don't really. I mean, I feel, it's funny, isn't it? Just about to say this, I think, oh, should I say that if this is going to be on the internet? Yeah, yeah. It's not in my scope of practice, real. Well, it sort of is, but it's not what's expected of me under my
Mhm.
registration to just offer human connection and love and
Right,
kindness.
right.
People want more than that. People want me to describe it differently. People want, but actually, Gertrude Schwing was this amazing nurse in the 1930s, worked with Frieda Reichmann, and she was a nurse who was trained as an analyst under Frieda Reichmann, and she used to say, bring a gift always to the person who's unreachable because you're asking them if you might come into their world, into their home, into their being in
Mm,
that moment. And if you go to someone's house for dinner, you might take a gift,
mhm.
an acknowledgement that you're going onto someone's land, into someone's home. So do that with people that are unreachable or hard to reach as an acknowledgement that they're equal to anyone else in your life. So I love that idea of taking her coffee because most of us take it for granted, right? That you can just go and buy a coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. But actually, I wonder what that gesture says. What does that say at the start of a meeting? That I could just bring you something to acknowledge that you're inviting me into your world.
Mhm.
Well, and it
And
is, and it's a world filled with, they're the stories of how she came to be living in a tent and why she was content in her way to live in the tent, even though it was really hard on her in a lot of ways. But she wanted to be there because it was an agreement she'd reached about how she was going to be able to exist in culture and society. So her way of being okay in the small city of Bangor, away from tribal lands, was to live in a tent at the racetrack because she had freedom and ability to self, and agency for herself. So to do anything less than respect it would be a big misunderstanding of what we're trying to do here. To do
Mhm.
anything but say, no, you worked hard for that tent.
Yeah.
It's not just because you're impoverished and your worldview is impoverished and we don't have enough housing. Well, I mean, it's all that too, but it power, threat, and meaning. But it's also, but it is your home,
And in a sense,
and
it was her sovereignty.
uh-huh.
It was her need
Mhm.
for,
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
and
sovereignty is the word.
yeah.
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 and it's a good example, isn't it? If we try and change her world because it works for us and our systems, that thing I was sort of thinking about and talking about she's putting that between her and the world. She's showing the world what she has available in all her qualities and in practical terms.
Mhm.
So why would we try and change that? She'll change that when she's ready, if she's ready, if that serves her stories. But
Mm.
all the time I try and change it, then I'm not honoring the story that she's bringing or the stories that she's bringing. And presumably that's because of me and my stories.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So how do I hold those stories, uh, honor them because I need to honor them in me as well. I'm not sacrificing my stories. I'm saying my stories are important. But if I'm coming to her, offering to serve her, to be with her, or any person, and that's their way of being, that's what I have to be in relationship with,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that's probably it. So best I work out how I can be in relationship with those stories.
Because
Um,
one of the stories culturally is that our job is to make people better. It's
Right.
like
mm,
there's something wrong with them. They're, diminished in relation to us, and we're supposed to
Well, our friend
improve them
Pat
in some way. Yeah.
Our friend Patrick says that social workers are the ambulance drivers of capitalism. He's a social worker, but he makes you, we must think, am I trying to make you better able to work in a system that is fundamentally unjust? And I need to question my values and question my stories for elements of kind of acceptance and complacency because my life is easier than hers. It's fewer socks and better boots. And what, how do I make sure that I'm not bringing an expectation of middle classness into the situation if that is not what we're after here, and is not accomplishable. Let's face it. Like, I mean, how do the jobs are going to be in the service industry, the pay is going to be, although right after COVID it was fantastic because people were paying a lot of money to people to serve a cappuccino because it was just that nobody wanted to work. And so you're getting paid a lot of the minimum wage, although not officially went up, it effectively went up a great deal around here to get
Mm.
staff. But I mean, just that is why you question yourself. That is why you have to question your own privilege and your own, stories, and be able to say, I have some stories that are really different than those, but also to honor that I also have some stories that are really tough, and I'm not going to, so I can bring it. I can, if you need that. But it's and
Yeah.
that's why, like Matt says, it's iterative. That's why it's a discussion. It's both of us in the room.
Mm.
And that's why, Eduardo Duran, who wrote Healing the Soul Wound, he talks about the importance of understanding, if you're from the dominant culture, the importance of understanding that you are bringing that, whether you wish you were or not. And to deny it is more culpable than to just say, yep, okay, there's this. But that's why we're focusing on your world and what you're trying to do here, and how we're
Yeah.
going to make it work.
Yeah, and for me, and that's why we have to ask the therapist, the doctor, the nurse, the whoever, the social worker, to notice their own stories, because otherwise that'll just take over. And that's what I get, or one of the things I hear from, say, two-eyed seeing is seeing multiple stories in me and the multiple stories in them, and remembering what my role is, remembering how I don't trample on someone's story. Or, we often teach people when they come to training, we try not to teach them anything by rote, but we it's very funny how people react to it, which is their stories and our stories. But we try and teach them, if you want to say something, maybe just really consciously sit with that story in your mind for 10 or 15 seconds and see if it's still relevant 10 seconds later, because it's easy to say it. But you might just find that the person tells you a very similar thing that you thought you were going to say, and it'll probably be more useful if they say it than if you say it. And Freud was a odd character, I think. He said in Remembering, Repeating, and Working Through a paper, I think 1926 or something, he said, it's the folly of the novice to think that to name something resolves it.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean we can't say things, but I do think, especially in the modern world of psychotherapy, nursing, healthcare, there's this desire to fix everything. So we think, I'll say it, and then it has to be resolved. And then we can discharge someone from care because we've told them what the problem is.
Yeah,
And then when they don't respond well to that, they're not really working hard, or
right, right.
and one of the things I see is these modern therapies. A passion of mine is IFS, that does this. I'm sure there's lots of good in IFS, internal family systems, but for me, when I hear about it, they've got this predetermined map.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
And I think people discover, if you can be in the wilderness not knowing where the map's going to take you with someone, and trust that they'll find their way out, that's real. For me, that's beautiful, but it's scary for me because it means I'm not as clever and wise as I thought I was.
It turns out that the therapist needs to learn how to sit with discomfort just as much as the client does.
Yes,
And
yes. You know
maybe
that
more, maybe
maybe
more.
more.
Yeah,
That's
because I got a degree.
that's so funny because it comes up in my supervision with my trainee because she's so much more comfortable in the role of inpatient psychiatrist prescribing medications. And I'm like, hey, this is different. There's no formula. You just have to sit with your own feelings and see what's coming up in you as you
Yeah.
interact with this person. And it's about building a relationship. And there's no formula for how you build a relationship because it's unique to each person. She's like, I don't like this.
And maybe I can pick up on that, Liz. You know, I do some deprescribing or supporting people to rationalize prescribing. And again, I notice as I say this, there's a nervousness about saying this online and being transparent about this because we're all licensed in different ways, and that comes with a set of stories, dilemmas. But you know, imagine if we, I mean, and I try to do this, imagine if we applied these approaches to prescribing, particularly of psychotropic drugs. And we said, you know, we won't start prescribing till we've heard the stories of your world around psychotropic drugs and my world, you know, because I'm frightened, I'm responsible. I got the prescription pad, I might get struck off, I might get accused of things, I might, but if I don't manage that, then I just do weird things to people. So, you know, I was saying to someone the other day, maybe you could, this person wants to come off their drugs and they are coming off their antipsychotics. And to me, unsurprisingly, they're not what would be called psychotic. They still have distress in the world, and that creates challenges and altered states and unusual realities. But okay, I mean, that's just a subjective position that one person's reality is odd or unusual. Anyway, I said to them, you know, there would be no reason why you couldn't have some olanzapine in the cupboard next to the paracetamol. And you know, you take olanzapine like you would take paracetamol. You've taken it for 10 years. There's not really likely to be any physical complications. I'm not being rebellious or difficult here. I'm saying if you've had all the ECGs and you've had 10 years of taking and all the blood tests and you've had 10 years of taking olanzapine and it's not, there doesn't seem to be indicated any acute physical health complications of taking olanzapine. I imagine going forward for the next 6 months taking 5 mils of olanzapine when there's suffering of an emotional form once in a while, that won't do you any harm. As if you've got a headache and you've drunk some water and you've been for a walk and you've tried to de-stress and you've still got a headache, maybe first just take some paracetamol, you know, and then you still need to think about why you got a headache if it goes on and on, of course. And so I think that was about listening to this person saying, I want to come off these drugs and sometimes I get frightened and overwhelmed. I don't want to be on these drugs all the time. So I'm, you know, one of the things that's said about me is that I'm anti-medication or I'm anti-psychiatry or anti-diagnosis. I think that's the story of other people. You know, one woman I work with, she's at pains to tell me we've taken her from 9 psychiatric drugs down to 3, thank goodness. And she wants to stay on 3. And she's 66 years old and she's a skillful human and she still always has had altered states or unusual realities, voices, visions, perceptual wisdom that's called psychosis maybe. And she says, Matt, please don't write out of my medical notes that I got schizophrenia. You know, I don't want you to do that. Well, of course. I mean, I want to write it out of our notes because I think schizophrenia is a wild idea that's well out of date and doesn't serve humans. But she's telling me that it's of value to her and that's important to her. And that requires me to to notice a lot of my stories. No, come on, let's write it out of your file. No one will ever be able to say this about you again, and we can take you off the rest of your drugs and you can be free. And she's saying, no, thanks. No. Oh, okay. Right. So that's my story then, that I want her off her drugs and no schizophrenia. So I'm not anti anything, but I'm really wanting to explore in the world of mental health therapy how we can manage our own stories in loving service of others.
And my story is that I want to keep people out of jail and hospital. And so if it takes a little medication to do that, I'm okay. Yeah.
I don't know if this would be helpful, but Barbara and I overlap a bit. I don't have any licenses. I mean, you do, but I don't. And certainly I could have gotten some, Um, my primary background is in theater and improvisation. So when I'm coaching people, which is, we figured out in the healthcare practice that I was working in that we could say that I was an integrative health coach because I can call myself that. But to me, when I'm working with people, it's an improvisation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a back and forth. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's not even back and forth. We're just kind of creating something
Yeah. Yeah.
together. And we don't even know what we're creating. And sometimes the content has to do with what supplement they're on or not on, or it might have to do with some family member that's sort of taking up all their oxygen. And if we don't, I have learned that if we don't talk about that, I can't help the person
Mm-hmm.
because that's their story. That's their drama, and so we kind of co-create um, something. It's like a drama. Sometimes it's a very funny drama, and sometimes sometimes it's sad. But I think some of those pulls I don't have because I don't have that training.
Yeah. Or anxiety. whether whether
Yeah.
waiting or anxiety. I'm
Well, one
not.
of the great things about being on stage or creating a scene with someone is you have to be fully present and you have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay attention because
Mm-hmm.
people will throw you a curve,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to look like a moron if you don't create something with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I went to see a friend's daughter recently who's been in distress and went to the emergency rooms and didn't have a very good experience. And when I went to their house, I said, "Oh, your mum said, would I pop over?" And she said, "Oh, no, mum wanted you to pop over." And I said, "Oh, I don't have to be here. I don't mind." She said, "No, you can stay." And, but what she kept saying was, no one asked me any questions. No one wanted to listen to me. No one wanted to hear what was happening to me. It was really overt. It was really powerful and strong. And it made me wonder what was happening for the professionals in the emergency rooms, being busy, and what you're saying, Sheldon, about people not necessarily being present because the other stories that are occupying their mind are just taking over the being present. And one of the things that happened between me and this young woman was when she feels like ending her life, or contemplating ending her life because it's not tolerable in these moments, she gets this sensation in her hands. And so she can feel it. So I got her to describe it, and we do this thing, and she has a purple elephant in one of her hands.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Is suicide. Now, I'm not sure why that's useful or why it's not. But what I know is that when she's feeling suicidal, she has this purple elephant in her hand. Now, like, it sounds weird, but this is what I love about connecting with you, Lewis and Barbara, is I feel like I can talk about this stuff without it being weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's normal for us.
Right. So she has a purple elephant in one hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a story that we can just hear. I wonder next time she's suicidal, what happens now that she knows she has a purple elephant in her hand, and whether that creates more stories or
Well,
different
what's the story
possibilities.
of the purple elephant?
And
Right.
it's so important because if I say,
Yeah.
oh, well, that sounds silly, or if I in any way disturb the purple elephantness without it being her, she shuts down.
Yeah.
I remember once we were doing a workshop and we were doing our body work with storytelling thing. And and we said, you listen to the person tell you what they're experiencing, colors and dynamics and range, and you let them talk and you don't argue with them. And we went around the room, and on one table there was this woman who was arguing openly with the person on the table and saying things like, no, but you're missing this. And I just, in listening, I just heard the woman on the table just shut down completely, just
Yeah.
stop her own exploration and sort of politely try to map onto this woman's, not thinking, not being outraged by it, just thinking she was doing the wrong thing and actually genuinely trying to do it. but then, and then my reflection was, but this whole area of where the purple elephant was going to lead, you've lost now. It's stopped, it's taken off the table, and now you can't follow her story because you only have your story of her story that she doesn't really agree with, but she's trying to put a round peg into a square hole. And because we try to please our providers, and you've missed
Yeah.
the opportunity to go like, tell me more about the purple elephant. Tell me more. Who, what did
That's
he
his
eat?
theme song.
Yeah, what's his theme song? What did he
You know,
eat?
wallpaper doesn't like.
Where's he living? Is he decorating, or is he
Yeah.
because those are the things that we often ask, what's the lighting like, and theme song, like Lewis says, who is this guy? Let's find out more about them.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Or her?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we probably should wrap up the formal part of this because people can't actually listen for more than an hour like that. So,
Yes.
but but anyway, this was really fun to have you with us.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop the recording.
And we're
Thank
going to
you.
go to the Hearing Voices
We
in
are.
Australia. So
Yes, we are.
we
We
will
are.
be
Next year, the World Hearing Voices Congress. And
absolutely
yeah,
And
I'll be there. It's going to
anyone
be
that's
amazing.
watching this needs to come to Adelaide, September
Yes.
13th to 15th for
2026.
for the Hearing
Yes.
Voices Conference.
Be there.
Be there or be
Hmm.
Yeah.
square. All right.